Comes in the name of the Lord. Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. We are no longer in the Garden of Eden. We are surrounded by a Garden of Eatin. When it comes to improving health and wellness, what's an essential component most people overlook? It's not exercise or water, or even kale. You might be surprised to learn that faith is the most overlooked ingredient. In this new book, you'll discover a firm spiritual foundation for your wellness journey, why previous diets probably failed, how your identity shapes your success, what the Bible really says about food and health, when being weird can make you well, and the surprising, wonderful benefits of wellness, and a knowledge of how much God cares about your health. Drs. Michelle and Mark are your guides on an enjoyable, eye-opening journey to build strong faith for your wellness. Dr. Michelle is a trained doctor of osteopathy. Is that how you say it?
Osteopathic.
Osteopathic. And Dr. Mark is a trained naturopath doctor. They use an integrated approach that focuses on prevention and lifelong wellness. The Sherwoods have a thriving medical practice, the Functional Medical Institute, and are recognized experts in health and wellness. You can find out more at fmidr.com. Joining us now to talk about their new book, Surviving the Garden of Eatin, E-A-T-I-N apostrophe, Surprising Biblical Insights to Enjoy Optimal Wellness. Dr. Michelle and Dr. Mark, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having us. We certainly and truly appreciate it.
We're grateful.
We are delighted to have you. This is such an important issue, one that we have covered a number of times with everything from Dr. Wright looking at the spiritual connection to a more excellent way of all the, the question becomes, it's not what you're eating, what's eating you.
Amen. That's right. Very true.
And it's a heart matter. And it's interesting as we get into this discussion that in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, there is no word for brain. Nowhere.
Interesting.
Everything has to do with the heart. And when we take a look at health, the heart is the engine. It's the pump. It's the area where there's all these cardiac issues between blockages, cholesterol, valves. All these issues have to do with the heart, this muscle that we have been blessed with, but we forget that it's also the so a man thinks in his heart, so he does. Every inclination of the imagination of a man's heart is wicked. The heart is wicked above all else. Who can know it? When you start to think about that these are all matters of the heart, we begin to think that, wait a second, how am I feeding this center? We do a lot with brain health with Dr. Timothy Jennings on the aging brain and how we can reverse early onset of dementia through diet, through spirituality, through a relationship with God, and through exercise. And it's not a magic bullet, but what it is it sets you up on a path of success as we all look at this gluttonous America and this health system that is so overwhelmed by preventable disease. And
Right.
I actually don't think it's disease. I actually think it's a hyphenated word, dis-ease, and break it down to we haven't found who knows our bodies better than us? We haven't found the way to communicate with our bodies, to read the signals, to understand. I actually know based on how I sleep as to whether or not I'm coming down with something. And I will immediately, and I have a concierge doctor, I'll immediately write them and say, I had a rough night's sleep. If I were to come into your office, you might see a little redness behind my ears or a little sinus, but I want to immediately go on, and I give them what I want. And they always come back and say, you've known you for 68 years, we've known you for 5. Who's the expert?
That's right. Exactly the point.
We've got to know that. Before we get into this, and both of you are so well credentialed to talk about this, it would be easy to jump right into the answers and the solution. But if we're going to take this into biblical insights for optimal wellness, we need to hear your journey and where your faith intersected in your life, where you chose that path that Jeremiah says, when you come to the crossroads, choose the ancient path, and there you'll find your peace. So, Michelle, take us back to your childhood, to your family upbringing, to your environment, the struggles, the challenges, but where you met the Lord and how that impacted you and put you on a path of understanding the balance between the natural and the supernatural.
Well, back, in my childhood really started off glorious. Everybody was healthy, everybody was well. But at the age of 12, my father suffered a serious accident. And after that accident, he was never right again. And of course, we prayed for healing, and healing, I'm sure, came in certain ways, but it disabled him to a point where he didn't function very well, which put me in a place where I became part of a provider for my family. And from that place, I had to start to find ways to do natural healing, because I myself didn't want to become like my father did, letting the things of life that derail you become a part of your psyche and a part of your spirit. So I used that as a way to catapult myself into the natural healing processes of massage therapy and naturopathic therapy, which eventually led me into traditional medicine, becoming an osteopathic medical doctor. And I found very quickly in medicine that people really weren't getting well with traditional medicine. It was a pill for every ill. I found myself knowing patients by the name of their disease instead of by their name. I would call them, "Hi, Mr. Hypertension," or "Hi, Mr. Blood Pressure," because I had 5 minutes to treat that patient and deal with their problem, and that problem needed a Band-Aid. Whether it was a high blood pressure medication, an insomnia medication, a weight loss medication, I didn't have the time to really delve into that person physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, which was what I found to be the biggest missing piece, is people are spiritually broken. So my path in traditional medicine didn't go well. I found myself without a job, in the dark, trying to figure out where I was going. We didn't see eye to eye. So in that space, in that 2-month period of time, I had a sign in my front room that said, "Be still and know that I am God." So just because I didn't mesh with traditional medicine, that's how the Functional Medical Institute was born, is I was quiet enough on the inside, and one day God spoke. He said, "Get up, go, open a clinic, help the nations, help the people, and I will help you." And in that day, the Functional Medical Institute came to life.
Praise God. Now, I love these stories when God grabs a hold of you in the moment where you come to realize you don't have the answers. You have the education, you have all the tools in the toolbox, but the missing piece. It's like having a shovel with a handle and a frame, but an empty hole where it's just the outline of the shovel, and you want to go dig a hole, and you're making progress in the outline of it, but everything is sifted. It just keeps falling through. So you are going through the action, but you're not accomplishing. It's like that rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't give you anywhere. And people are manifesting in the natural spiritual maladies that is a mindset, is a heart set, is very defeating and debilitating, connected to a lot of sources, shame being one of them,
Yes.
body imaging, and the internet, Instagram, and this Barbie and Ken picture that we have as these ideals, and it's just not healthy. So,
Right.
so Mark, what was your journey like?
In a nutshell, a little bit different. I had a really awesome childhood, I would say. I was adopted, selected by my parents. I thought that was really cool. They instilled in me early on that was a neat choice, and it was really good. It was a healthy environment. Became a Christian when I was 7. Served faithfully. Eventually, I had a dream to play professional sports and did for a time. And then after that, I eventually joined a police department, a very large metropolitan police department, where I was able to serve in a variety of assignments, including the SWAT team for 10 years. And in that time there, I began to see and understand people a little bit better, that anybody's capable of anything, that I'm capable of anything, that there's nobody that's any better than anybody else, or nobody that's any worse than anybody else. And we all need to understand that. And then during that time, you get in that environment, and you see people at their worst, you see them at their best, and you see mankind's fallibilities, and you see also the glory of God. And in that time, I saw people dying, literally dying. And I wanted to figure out why. And so my story began in this health kind of a funny way. I was always taught that God would speak to me in a vision at some point. So I kept this notepad by my bed, right, with a pen there. And that sat there for years. And I got so stubborn with that, I wasn't going to move it. And dust gathered around my pen, and I thought, I'm going to leave it right in that dust spot. One day that thing's going to move. And then one night I had this dream. Completely wild. It was vivid, and I was literally writing on a notepad while leaning on my bathroom counter. And when I woke up, it was one of those times where I remember the dream, and it seemed so real. And then it hit me, maybe it was real. And I cautiously and very slowly looked to my left, where this notepad was saying, was there, and my pen was not in the same position. It had moved. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, now what? So my heart is beating fast. And I looked over, and sure enough, there were words on that paper. And I quote, "My people have lost their power. They've lost their power because they've lost their peace," much like your disease statement. They've lost their peace because they've neglected the physical peace. And he gave me scriptures, namely some in Matthew 22, 37 to 39, talking about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And he zoned me into that as yourself thing, and we really forgot that piece, to really have that good relationship with who we are as a person. And he told me to carry that message around the world. And I'm like, oh no, you're talking about messing with somebody's diet, lifestyle, and all of that. And I fought that thing with everything I could for probably 3 or 4 years. And then finally, much like Dr. Michelle stated, it was time to move, time to go, no more delay. And since then, we have not, and will not look back. We must turn this around. Most people's physical maladies and diseases are strictly driven from the concept of spiritual brokenness. And even in one of our books, not this one, we talk about this concept of frauds, which is an acronym: fear, resentment, anger, unforgiveness, disappointment, and shame. And the fraud is that Satan takes away everything we are, and he tries to steal your identity. And when you lose who you are and your identity, you lose the ability to access, if you will, all the fullness of God. And therefore, he begins to use you for his own work instead of you being allowed God access to be used for his work. And then we find that we're not living anymore. And we don't really push people about calendar age. I want them to live. Don't focus on life and death. Focus on life, man, and live it to an optimum capacity. And if we can do that effectively, we would decrease, in effect, this concept of our sick span. We have this lifespan, we have health span, and we have sick span. We need to decrease that sick span to very short, and so that our death process, which is not death at all for us as believers, but that process is one that's very short, so that transition is seamless in a sense and not painful. It doesn't have to be like that. So, that's my journey, and obviously we are very passionate about where we stand, and we really want people to understand that because of our pains and things that we've been through. I mean, Dr. Michelle was homeless at one time, and I had to deal with a suicide of my parent. I mean, life's not a bed of roses, man. It can be painful at times, but you learn the value of life, and you have to communicate that. So our lives, I hope, would exemplify that of being hope dealers.
Well, I'm the proud adopted father of a 30-year-old daughter. I got her at birth, and she just gave me 7 months ago my first grandchild.
Yay.
Fantastic.
And,
Awesome.
She's actually on her way here to town to spend a couple days with me. We're very close, and you're exactly right. This was a God-ordained, chosen child for me. She actually looks exactly like me and has my feet.
Love
Very
it.
interesting.
Love that.
Yeah, which is, there's not a picture that people don't say, oh, your daughter looks just like you. And we just laugh and just say that we do. In order to do what you do, you go to a doctor, you fill out a questionnaire, you fill out a form, and on that form is known allergies, what are your symptoms, what medications do you take, family history, all those things. Knowing that there is a spiritual connection to all this, where do you approach that with your patients? Do you approach that in the intake process? Do you approach that in the triage part of the interview?
Yeah, we approach it at the beginning because in our methodology, we communicate to people there are 4 parts to the person, really 5, but physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and we're not afraid to talk about financial either because we need to be debt-free in all those areas. So we talk about it from that aspect, and we lead into the spiritual component by asking them questions like, what's your greatest fear? What's when was the last time you felt awesome? And we always track that back to a time where something traumatic happened. And so, God does open the door for that at that point. And then we openly pray with people. We believe that when we invite God to have full access, miracles happen. And even outside of our office, there's a big, in our lobby, this big glass vase that's full, and it's big. It's really big. It's full of empty pill bottles. And it just keeps filling up and dumps over, and we throw it away. Those are deep prescriptions. So we have to create in the environment, our body's environment, that we are designed to be well. And the body is an amazing healing mechanism. And as you correctly said earlier, and I know we'll get into it later, the preventable disease process is just that. Most of our stuff that we're dealing with, and we would put it up to the 90 percentile or greater, is self-created and self-driven because of either rebellion, addiction, or we just don't know, right? Ignorance. But when we do know and don't do it, that becomes clear rebellion, and there is a darkness across the land that needs to be unveiled, and people need to see it. I know you see it. People need to get this, and when you get that, you can walk well.
It's very interesting that the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden in the Hebrew, was everything was provided for, in fellowship, relationship with God, food. Everybody ate the same things. They didn't eat each other, and we know by nature the healing powers of the bark of a tree became one of the most common cancer treatments, broad spectrum cancer treatments available. It was simply harvested from a bark of a tree in South America. So God's put this tremendous healing power in it. As we examine the RNA and the DNA of all living things, there's somewhere between a 94 to 98% commonality between all of those living things. So yes, me and a tree have the same building blocks of life. We were both created from the dust of the earth. So we're going to have common elements which are a part of us. There are diseases that attack trees. There's diseases that attack man. But it's the concert. When we look at what God created us for, we tend to go with, well, we were created to worship. We were created for fellowship. We were created for community. We were created, but you say we were created for health. And so this is, and certainly from your perspective, that was where you should be going, is let's take a look at what we were created for. And when we look at the lifespans of all the way up through Methuselah, we see some pretty amazing things. The most amazing is the one line in Genesis where it says, and Enoch walked with God and was no more.
Mm-hmm.
Enoch walked with God for 365 years.
Yes.
365 years, showing us that although we fell in the garden, God still wanted to walk with man. He walked with us in the garden, and this was an example to us that he wanted to continue. And it was for a long period of time. It wasn't for a short period of time. And it was certainly sin which robbed us of a lot of this, but belief in Jesus in Luke 10:19, he says, I've given you the authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing whatsoever shall harm you. Well, that to me includes disease and
Yes, sir.
The demonic realm and spiritual warfare. You say we were made for health. Sum that up for us.
Well, I think when you look at health, I mean, what is our purpose for living? It's to represent God in the earth, isn't it? It's, when we talk about the model prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it. So this concept of Eden, we live that right now. We live with this abundance mentality, this mentality that we have a perfect relationship where God walks with us and we walk with him, and we are walking in the earth to represent the fullness of him, just like Jesus did. With the point being, if we believe that God is about healing, why would he create dysfunction? And why would he create a bunch of people that are going to walk around sick to represent a God who doesn't care about them? And life and health and living and abundance and all these, let's call them Eden-like principles or Garden of Eden principles, they are not past, nor are they future. They are now, because we live in this concept of eternity, right? And so if we really get out of our way and realize that even though we're in time, we're also in eternity. And if we're in eternity right now, we need to live it out right now with this idea to get time out of our way and realize we have a higher purpose that is really, much like the acronym Igniting a Nation. We need to ignite the world with this, man, because we're missing it, and we need to get that powerful walk back. And I think that epitomizes the very definition of how we would talk about this walk of health as a representation.
We're talking with Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, authors of the new book, Surviving the Garden of Eatin, Surprising Biblical Insights to Enjoy Optimal Wellness. If we were created to be healthy, that in God's perfect design, He gave us this inexplicable, Grey's Anatomy doesn't come close to being able to outline. It may list all the pieces and parts, but the fact that you're breathing, your heart's beating, all these autonomic functions that happen, and you have no part in it whatsoever. Nothing to do with it. God created this system, and it was a system for health, for healthy cells. And we poison ourselves by what it is that we not only think, not only what we believe, but what we do. And James summed it up, and he says, faith without works is death. So Dr. Sherwood's believe that the beginning of your path to healing starts spiritually. We can get you on a weight loss plan, we can get you an exercise plan, we can get you a dietary plan, but that is temporal. And they are as concerned as your eternal, and with your eternal, as they are your temporal. And in your temporal, you can't be effective for God when you are unhealthy. You cannot be faithfully serving on a regular basis. The whole concept of burnout is so foreign to me. I've kept the same pace of long working weeks, and I have more free time than anybody I know. And yet I put in 80 and 90-hour weeks every week, and have since 1972. I don't have the capacity for burnout because I've got a strong balance in my life. This is the message, and we've now heard the concept. Your spiritual health aligns with your physical health. They are inextricably connected. They cannot be separated, for your well-being has to do with your Creator, your relationship with your Creator, and what His design is for your life. And that is that your body is the temple of the living God. And how you take care of that temple, and how God wants that to be a shining example, and for it to be noticeable, not because you're big muscles and you're so incredibly fit, but because you are a light. Healthy people are lighter in their countenance, lighter in their eyes, lighter in their being than sick people. There's a pallor over that. And when we think about this statement that Jesus made, let your light so shine, is our physical well-being a representation of that light? Can we be spiritually healthy and be obese? We can't, because we're spending more time dealing with obesity and the pitfalls of obesity, that our infirmity becomes our God, and God says anything that comes before Him is an idol. And so it's a matter of house cleaning and finding this optimal wellness. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we've talked about the what to. When we come back, we're going to talk about the how to with Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Eatin in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. We're talking with Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood about their new book, Surviving the Garden of Eatin: Surprising Biblical Insights to Enjoy Optimal Wellness. Michelle and Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we talked about what we were made for. We were made to be healthy. We were created to be healthy. And our spiritual health is a barometer. It's an indicator of our physical health. And a lot of times we're dealing with spiritual maladies that manifest themselves in physical ways. And we also have physical triggers, which our response to those physical triggers can impact our health. So there has to be this balance. And God even speaks about false balance is an abomination to God. So we have to balance the natural with the supernatural, and that's what your practice at the Fitness Medical Institute, FMIDR.com, is all about. So in this battle, which it is a battle, it's a war, we're fighting against certain things. Who's the real enemy in this battle?
Well, there's no question. Our enemy is Satan and his demons and his influence, and we must understand that in this journey that we are in, his scheme has not changed. You go back to Genesis 3, and what did he? He had one shot to mess it up.
Right.
One shot. And if he didn't succeed at that point, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, would we? The one shot, he picked that relationship that mankind had with in context some of the appetite that God had given them. And in effect, he was saying, maybe what God provided you in abundance is not enough. Maybe there's something better out here. And maybe you need to have one bite of this. And I find that ironic because we're dealing with the one bite of the apple context, even with our media things, that one set, the look on the apple, right? But it's that one bite. And his whole strategy is the same today. And good God-fearing people out there every day in groups of worship across this country and world are succumbing to this concept of having one bite. And it's interesting to know there's even donut ministries. I find that quite, paradoxical in the sense that it doesn't make sense, because we know one bite of that is destroying the physical body. And Satan knows that, but he gets us believing that it's actually better. And that's where we really have to sort of wake up and understand that our enemy is real. And even when we talk about his purpose of stealing, killing, destroying, I mean, we look at that in John 10:10, but does he really effectively win when he kills us, like physically kills us and snuffs our life out? Or does he win when he can kill us so we can be dead while alive? I would submit that it's the latter, because his effectiveness would have a chance to permeate the earth through, instead of living to live, live to die, right? And so his strategy is the same since then, and we need to understand that, and we need to know that. And the best thing we can do is quit giving him a platform, quit talking to him, quit arguing with him, quit screaming at him, quit trying to cast him out, in a sense, and just think about the goodness of God. And if we did that, God's presence is the one that casts out the fear, right? So if we would just get that idea into our spirit, God is about healing. God is about life. God is about abundance. He's not about, saying, well, everything in moderation. That's a sort of misinterpretation of that passage badly, because in that case we're talking about consecrated food. But in the reality today, it's not everything in moderation, because that means, well, you can cheat on your marriage once in a while, you can cheat on finances once in a while, you can just cheat any way you want once in a while, because it's okay, because everything in moderation is fine. What we've done, we've selectively picked up the things that we want to do in moderation, we've justified it, and it's coming back to bite us because all we did is fall into a trap.
Paul said that all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial.
Yes.
It amazes me that, and I'm an ordained rabbi, I'm an ordained Baptist minister, define myself as a Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew. I lived 44 years in the synagogue. I come from a Jewish heritage, Jewish lineage, and God, when I came to the Lord, and it says, behold, I declare all things clean. I ate shrimp and I ate pork, and didn't take me 6 months before all of a sudden I couldn't walk. My big toe was so inflamed that even the touch of a sheet on that toe sent me into an absolute way above a level 10, worst pain I'd ever felt. And I had a case of gout. Mm-hmm. And when they said to me, we can put you on a medication, the first thing the medication is going to do is, when you've had enough when you're sick to your stomach. And I said, well, you're going to give me a medication that the only way I know that I've had enough is when my entire GI system is completely on fire. And I said, well, that's just how this particular medication works.
Makes a lot of sense.
Then they said, but we can also put you on something that if you're going to continue eating that way, well, then we're going to enable you to do that by putting you on a medication. I said, I'm not taking a medication for the rest of my life. I just won't eat the pork or shellfish. And so that became something that was taken out of my diet, not for legalistic reasons, not for even biblical reasons. They were for very practical reasons. They were obviously harmful to my body chemistry. Now, my DNA is Jewish. Maybe it's in my DNA that we have a predisposition in our DNA to maintain clean input of our diet. If we look at the solutions available to us in not only the spiritual warfare, but actually if you look at the armor of God, we can translate each one of those pieces of the armor of God into something that you include in your book and you include in your practice of lifestyle which matches up to that warfare. How can we enter into warfare and fight the enemy which is eating us? So how do we? What are the solutions? How do we live alive? How do we not be so bound by, oh, I can't take one bite of that? And the same legalism that I see in these regimented programs makes you just as legalistic, and the more rigid any theology, any doctrine, any policy is a breeding ground for sin. We see that in the Boy Scouts of America, the Catholic Church, Baptists now coming out. The more rigid you are, the more prone you are to sexual sin, but also to other sin, because it's once you break it, now you're beating yourself up over it. And how are you taming the beast? Well, with a cupcake, with food, and
That's right.
Food has become the drug of choice, if you will, for a great deal of American. I'm in the fattest state in the country. Alabama is the fattest state
boy.
in
Yes,
the
you
country.
are.
So how do we live alive, and how do we make change? Because man is designed to resist change.
We see that all the time, don't we? This is interesting. Now we talk about this a lot. We tell people we don't even allow them to use the word diet here. No diet's allowed. God's about abundance. God's not about restriction. He's about abundance and freedom. So we teach people that idea, and so we don't tell them what not to do. In other words, I'm not going to focus on that. We give them a list of things, of foods in general, that are considered to be broadly agreed upon to be anti-inflammatory foods. And those consist of, just good fruits and vegetables, good quality proteins, and good quality fats, right? And so we give them a broad list and we say, have as much of that as you want to.
I want to stop you right there, because you used a term that is now associated with every single known chronic disorder across the spectrum, from heart to kidney to liver to bone, and that is anti-inflammatory.
Yes,
that
sir.
the body's response to inflammation, to those things which cause the body to become inflamed, enraged, irritated, swollen, is a prime contributor to everything.
Chronic sickness and disease,
everything we know.
Well, yeah, and we know that inflammation, I mean, it is, we must look at inflammation in its proper context, because it is a normal response from the immune system when there's an intruder, invader, or damage. And that's good. But when it's dealing with intruder, invaders, and multiple damages at the same time, it cannot function. It becomes like this wildfire out of control that we cannot control any longer. And therefore, every single solitary disease process that we know has this concept of, systemic chronic inflammation as an attachment. And so our lifestyle must be transitioned to become anti-inflammatory in general. And that means that we consider everything that we put in our mouth, that comes out of our mouth, that we put in our ears, in our eyes, on our skin, do with our body. Does it promote a conceptual process of anti-inflammatory environment. And if it does, therefore that would be conducive to what you talked about earlier. The body is a repairing mechanism. It's a healing mechanism. It's the most awesome healing machine that I know of, and it will fix itself. And so when we talk about the solutions with people and they come back and say, like, for example, well, you know how it is, I've got to have a bite of this. We come back and say, no, no, let's change the language. Let's don't say that we are addicted to comfort food, addicted to sugar, addicted to bread. Let's therefore say, I am living a life conducive with healthy blood sugar. I find it easy to make good lifestyle choices. God directs my path. I don't have a problem saying no. I don't have a problem saying yes. And freedom is the epitome of what we want to achieve, right? There's freedom in Christ, and freedom looks like to us in this, if Dr. Michelle and I are out and we wanted to have a bite of cake, we could, and it's not going to hurt me. It is not going to hurt me. I can do that any single time I want to. We have no limitations. Do I? No, I don't, because I think that if somebody sees me do that, I might lead my brother astray. There might be somebody there that's about to lose a leg because of type 2 diabetic or this concept of neuropathy. And that's not going to hold water because I've just let somebody fall. Now, if we're in our own home and I want to bite a cake, which we don't, but I'm just using this example, we could, no problem, because we are free. When we get that in our very spirit and life, Eric, we begin to see that freedom is not just normal, it's easy. And then we stop thinking about the restrictions. It's not rigid at that point. It's free because I can have as much of anything that I want, right? I'm just directed by God in me, because I know that the body that I have is not my own. It's not mine to abuse. If you come to my house and mess it up, you probably won't come back, So I'm glad God's forgiving like that. But the idea is for us to just simply live free.
It's very interesting. There's quite a few lists out there. They're available. You have them as well, resources for healthy life, for healthy eating. You have several other books that kind of make a stack of lifestyle choices and changes that you can make. But because God created each one of us as an individual gifting, an individual design, it's really quite interesting is that my physical response to the nuts, which are supposed to be healthy, is that my body takes those and says, I'm going to convert all those directly to fat.
Yep.
I'm not going to use them as a source of protein. So I had to learn that when the list says peanut butter is a good evening, an apple with a spoon of, a tablespoon of peanut butter, for me, that was like adding a pound of weight to me, because so I went through all the nuts, pistachios, cashews, all those things, and finally realized this isn't a nut allergy. It's my body sees that and says, I'm going to store that, and so it's not a good source of protein for me. That's exactly. And so peanut butter was one of my most favorite things, but when I removed it, which I needed to because my body didn't metabolize it the way the book says, the books say, the things, and this is where we have a responsibility. And you clearly stated that the enemy in the very beginning was not just Satan, but it's us.
You bet.
We are that enemy. So knowing that we can't correct our course by spinning that wheel on that ship and doing a complete about face, how do we set reasonable expectations for lifestyle changes, both spiritually and nutritionally, to accomplish this wellness that we're all striving for.
Yeah, so one of the things that we actually do in the practice is we look at a panel of genes, genetics. We're 99.9% alike, like we talked about earlier. These genes that we test are actually genes that are actionable, which means the lifestyle that you live, if you live and violate these genes, you're likely to get heart disease, you're likely to get diabetes, you're likely to have higher levels of inflammation. And it's awesome to know that when we see these genes, if we know that, then we can take the things out that are going to make us fat because we don't utilize fat well. We can take the things out that drive inflammation because we already have high levels of inflammation. We can modulate the things that may lead us down a pathway of heart disease or Alzheimer's disease. Yeah. So just because you're born with a certain blueprint, like you talked about with uric acid and gout, if you eliminate the offending agent, we heal. We don't have to become that. So the genes are a loaded gun, and the environment pulls the trigger.
You know, it's very interesting you say that, because I grew up in an Eastern European home. My father was a Hungarian immigrant. Kohlrabi was an everyday. It was eaten like an apple. It was an everyday. There's not a day that I can remember in my life when I didn't have this particular vegetable. Beets, very important part of the Eastern European, my mother's family Ukrainian, so borscht, beet related. Root vegetables were always because that was, you could grow those, you could control those. You didn't have to buy those at the market. You had them out of it. So root vegetables were always an integral part of my life and my diet. So if you were to test my genes and look at what my genetic response would be, it's southern Poland, western Ukraine, Hungary. All of my people, 16 generations that we know of, are all from right there, with almost within a 400-mile radius of each other. We're mountain people, and we're designed that way. And we all have the same body structure. We have the same frame. We all have barrel chests, which is out of proportion to our waist size. No American measurement of clothing ever worked for any male in our families, because of our unique mountain Eastern European build. So I completely understand with that genetic makeup. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'd love to have the two of you back on to talk more about this. The book is called Surviving the Garden of Eatin, E-A-T-I-N', Surprising Biblical Insights to Enjoy Optimal Wellness. It's the balancing act, and it's not just what you eat, it's what's eating you. It is finding a way to find wellness in wholeness, in a balanced relationship with your Creator, through the arbiter of your faith, the sacrifice made for you of Jesus on the cross, to give you access to the full counsel of heaven, where wisdom is imparted, and you know that you can make choices, that God created you with a contrary spirit, but that contrary spirit can be harnessed. You have the choice between good and evil, and if you continually choose the path of evil and those things which are going to harm you, Job said it best. He said, "That which I feared the most has come to pass." Mm-hmm. Every person I've ever known that says, "I'm deathly afraid of cancer," it runs in my family. "I'm so afraid I'm going to get cancer. I'm so afraid I'm going to get cancer." All of a sudden, they come up with a cancer diagnosis. It is your thought life, your spiritual life, your foundation of thinking added to what it is you put in your body and what you do with your body. Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, you can find out more about them at fmidr.org. ignitingnation.com. I encourage you to visit ignitingnation.com, click on today's broadcast schedule, and you'll find a question. It says, love the interview, get the book. Click on that link, and it'll take you right to it. It is the easiest read of every book that's come across my desk, and you know, we're now in our 1800th interview series. I see a lot of these books. Simplest to read, simplest to understand, easiest to apply. Great wisdom does not take a lot of words. And so, Drs. Mark and Michelle Sherwood, thank you for sharing this with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you for having us. It was truly a joy.
God bless you, my friends. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.